After working with hundreds of marketing teams in the last decade, I've noticed that most businesses do a lot of things backward. Not in a small way, in a fundamental structural way that makes most of what they're doing significantly less effective than it could be. And I'm not talking about picking your channels before you have an ICP or allocating too much budget to paid search or asking AI what our copy should be without giving it context. Those are real problems, but they're indicative of something much more basic. The thing I'm talking about is how we focus on numbers instead of people. We focus on cutting costs instead of creating value, and we pay the people most responsible for our customer experience the least, and we market to who someone is instead of what they're currently experiencing. So let me take those one at a time. So looking at numbers instead of people. Every marketing dashboard tells a story about what's going on in your marketing. It's an abstraction of actual events shown in a way that we can read at a high level. And that abstraction is useful. I mean, you need to know what's working. But if the dashboard tells a story about what's happening, is it a good story? Imagine a story of a guy searching on Google for a SaaS product with native AI integration. So he sees an ad that has a search term in it and it's first in the search results. So he clicks. He sees a lot of reviews on the page and decides to book a demo. It's not really a great story. So now imagine this. David is nervous. He's been working with Venture Tech's marketing team for 3 weeks, and Madison's already asked him to find a way to cut back on the number of software platforms they're using. So he's been copy-pasting context a lot between their design software and Claude, and he thinks that finding design software with built-in AI would help. So he's been researching some on ChatGPT, and he has some options, but he wants to see what Google comes up with. So his search shows that one of the platforms that AI Chat recommended, and it's in the sponsored ads section. So he clicks because it's at the top and decides to start there. But he sees a lot of reviews on the page, and it kind of helps him feel a little bit better because he's been worried about making the wrong choice and wasting Madison's time. So he wants to make a good impression and bring the team some quick wins so that he can feel a bit more secure about his new role. So he looks at the bad reviews and feels like the downside's not going to hurt them any more than what they're already using. But the upside of saving that time with copy pasting would help, and they'll probably get better results from the design platform with that built-in AI because the platform will save that conversation context and design preference files for later reference. So he decides, okay, I want to see more. This is probably worth it, and the downside's not so bad. So I'm going to go ahead and book a demo. I really hope this is going to be worth it. So can you see the difference? Like you can tell what a person did to an extent with an analytics dashboard, and with a clarity recording, you can make some educated guesses about what's important to a person. But if you can't understand what they're going through and what their problem is and how that problem affects them, then making the numbers go up is more guesswork than strategy. Marketing to who someone is rather than what they're experiencing at the time. Now, this is what I want to spend the most time on because it's the one that actually ties everything together. When you build your marketing around who your customer is, you're building around demographics, firmographics, maybe even psychographics, but you've got title, company size, industry, age range, maybe even that they're feeling urgency and skepticism. These tell you who's in the room. They don't tell you anything about why today is different from 3 months ago. The person you're trying to reach doesn't think of themselves as a VP of marketing at a 200-person SaaS company. They think of themselves as someone who's been dreading a board meeting because they still can't clearly answer which of their channels are actually driving revenue, or someone whose sales team has been complaining about lead quality for 3 quarters in a row, and that conversation's starting to go in circles. That's the version of them that you need to be talking to, not the LinkedIn profile version. And here's where I want to bring in a little bit of science, right? So your brain has a filter. You have a system in your brain called the reticular activating system, and its job is to decide what gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets filtered out before you ever even notice it. Most things get filtered out. Your brain is getting an enormous amount of input every second, and the vast majority of it never really registers with your conscious mind. The filter is constantly running, asking 3 things about everything it encounters. Is this new? Is this relevant? Or is this important to me right now? So if the answer is no, it goes. You don't experience the rejection, you just don't notice the thing. So the classic example of this that everybody likes to use, and I go to it because it's a go-to, is buying a car. So you start thinking about buying a specific car, and suddenly you see that car everywhere. It didn't multiply. Those cars were always there. Your filter just stopped throwing them out because they suddenly became relevant to your life. So apply this to your buyers. When your buyer doesn't have the problem you solve, your message hits that filter and gets thrown away. Every email, every ad, every piece of content you put in front of them, it's not that they saw it and disagreed. It's literally that it didn't register in their attention. So the filter decided it wasn't relevant and moved on before it reached their conscious thought. And you can't outspend this. You can't out-target this. If the problem isn't present for them yet, the message doesn't get through. But that's not always the problem that you might think it is. So looking at the flip side, that same filter that was blocking your message will start actively surfacing information the moment the problem becomes relevant. So when something shifts and a person goes from tolerating a situation to needing a solution, the filter will actually start letting things in and focusing on it. It's a reticule, and reticules focus. So it's activating the reticule. And every brand that's been consistently showing up during that dormant period suddenly becomes visible. So it feels to them like it appeared out of nowhere, but it didn't. It was always there. And the filter has just now let it come through. So the marketing teams that are brave enough to continue talking to people, even if they're not ready to close right away, even though it may cost time and money, tend to be the ones who get the lion's share of the lead quality that sales is always complaining about, because they showed up when the filter was not open yet. And when they did, when that filter opened and things that you were saying suddenly became important or relevant, you were already familiar. And familiarity is also important. You can usually see the effects of this when a campaign works by every leading metric, but can't close enough to hit its targets. So you've got a solid click-through rate, decent conversions, okay MQLs, but everyone is backing out. So the dashboard said yes, the people said no, and there's no obvious explanation because the numbers looked fine. It's not a measurement problem. It's not a sales problem. It's a perspective problem. Focusing on getting more leads didn't bring a proportional lift to sales. And because that strategy was built on lead gen instead of understanding people and helping them how they wanted it the most, nobody knows what went wrong. Focusing on cutting costs instead of creating value. Ogilvy's vice chairman, Rory Sutherland, tells a story about a luxury hotel and its doorman. Management hires consultants who look at the labor costs and decide that the doorman is a line item that can be cut. His job is to open the door, and a sensor could do that cheaper. So what they don't account for is the concentric value created by the doorman. He greets returning guests by name, signifies high-value status, and provides a level of security. None of that shows up in the budget analysis. Sutherland calls this the doorman fallacy. We solve problems at the level we can see and measure, not at the level where they actually exist. We cut branding efforts because they don't have clean attribution. We eliminate anything we can't connect directly to a closed deal. And over time, we kill everything that actually builds trust and familiarity because none of it shows up in the spreadsheet until it's already gone. And then we do the same thing to our own people. So here's the version of the mistake that nobody talks about. The person with the most direct influence over your customer experience, the one answering the phone, handling the complaint, making the first impression of your brand, is usually the lowest paid employee. So we design customer experience strategies in the boardroom and then hand the execution to someone who makes $15 an hour and maybe saw a 10-minute video on how to execute all of this. Like, this is the face of your company, the voice of your brand, and the single greatest conduit of your culture. And we pay them like they're interchangeable. They're the first to go if profits are low, and they're viewed as unskilled labor. But that's the doorman fallacy at scale. So we optimized the payroll line and hollowed out the thing that actually drives loyalty, referrals, and retention. Because the connection between that employee's attitude and the lifetime value of the customer doesn't show up cleanly on any report. So what does this mean for your marketing? Well, if you're only showing up at the moment of purchase, then you're arriving after that filter is already opened. And if you weren't there before it opened, then you're starting cold, while the brands that were already there are familiar and therefore more likely to be trusted or preferred according to the mere exposure effect. So most marketing strategy is built for the 1 to 3% of your market that's actively comparing options and ready to make a decision. And that's fine while you're starting out, because you need to focus on people who are ready to buy now so that you can close enough to justify the budget you've been given. But that other 97% of your market is somewhere in the process of developing the problem that you solve. So some of them are already living with early symptoms and don't have language for it yet. So you could give them the right words for their problem and be their guide through it. Some of them have felt it, but they're not ready to act yet. So you could show them why the cost of the problem is higher than the perceived cost of the solution. And some of them don't know that the problem exists yet. So you could show them what it looks like so that they recognize those symptoms early and recognize your name in association with solving the problem. So if your marketing only speaks to that 1 to 3%, you're invisible to everyone else until they're ready to buy. And at that moment, you're a new name competing against brands that have been showing up for months. This is what pre-contact journey mapping is designed to fix. Not just understanding who your buyer is, but understanding when their brain perceives your messaging as relevant, what triggers that shift, and what they're paying attention to in the months before they contact anyone. Once you have that map, you can stop doing everything backward and align your strategy with the way that people actually work.